The night was cold, and the rain drizzled steadily over the bustling streets of downtown Chicago. The city lights reflected off puddles scattered across the sidewalks, creating a shimmering mosaic that seemed almost magical in its chaos. Amidst this urban glow sat Mia Harper, a young woman with fiery red hair tucked under a hooded jacket, perched on a weathered bench outside a tiny pizzeria. The smell of garlic and melted cheese wafted through the air, mingling with the dampness of the rain-soaked evening. Mia had just turned 32 but carried herself with the determination of someone much older. She wasn't wealthy or famous, nor did she aspire to be. Instead, her world revolved around art, paintbrushes, canvases, and colors that spoke louder than words ever could. But life as an artist wasn't easy, especially when rent was due and grocery bills piled up. Tonight, all she could afford was one slice of pepperoni pizza from the little shop behind her. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As she nibbled carefully at the warm slice, savoring every bite like it was her last meal, her eyes wandered to the street lamp across the way. Standing beneath its flickering light was a man who looked entirely out of place. He wore a tailored coat, the kind you'd see on executives walking briskly into skyscrapers during rush hour. Yet here he was, standing motionless, drenched from head to toe by the relentless rain. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his shoulders sagged slightly, as though carrying some invisible weight. Curiosity tugged at Mia. Who was this man? Why was he standing there alone in the pouring rain? She studied him for a moment longer before shaking her head. "Mind your own business," she muttered to herself, turning back to her pizza. But something about him lingered in her thoughts. There was a sadness in his posture, a weariness that resonated with her own struggles. Despite everything, Mia couldn't ignore the tug of empathy pulling at her heart. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, clutching the remainder of her pizza in one hand while holding her jacket closed with the other. Her boots splashed through puddles as she crossed the short distance between them. When she reached him, she hesitated briefly, suddenly unsure of what to say. Finally, she cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me?" she began, her voice barely audible over the patter of raindrops. The man turned toward her, startled. His face was pale, his dark hair plastered against his forehead, and his eyes held a mixture of surprise and confusion. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mia extended her arm, offering him the half-eaten slice of pizza. "I know it's not much," she said quickly, feeling self-conscious now. "But you look like you could use it more than I can." The man blinked, clearly taken aback. He glanced down at the pizza, then back up at Mia, his expression unreadable. Rain dripped steadily from the brim of his coat, but he made no move to shield himself. After what felt like an eternity, he finally reached out and accepted the offering. His fingers brushed against hers briefly, sending a jolt of electricity through her nerves, not because of romance, but because of the sheer humanity of the moment. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low and gravelly, weighed down by emotion. He took a small bite, chewing slowly as if savoring not just the taste but the gesture itself. Mia shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to stay or leave. Eventually, she decided to sit beside him on the curb, despite the wet concrete soaking through her jeans. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the sound of rain providing a soothing backdrop. Finally, the man broke the quiet. "I'm Daniel," he said, glancing sideways at her. His tone was tentative, as though testing the waters. "Mia," she replied with a slight smile. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." He nodded, still eating the pizza thoughtfully. "You didn't have to do that, you know," he added after a pause. "Give me your food, you must have been hungry too." Mia shrugged, brushing a strand of wet hair away from her face. "It's just pizza," she said lightly, though inside she knew how precious that single slice had been. Besides, it's not every day you get to share dinner with a stranger under a street lamp. Daniel chuckled softly, the sound surprising, even himself. "True," he admitted. "Though most people wouldn't bother stopping for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Mia echoed, raising an eyebrow. What does that mean? For a moment, Daniel hesitated, as if debating how much to reveal. Let's just say I don't usually inspire kindness from strangers, he said cryptically. Before Mia could press further, he changed the subject. So what brings you out here on a night like this? Mia sighed, leaning back on her hands. Just trying to survive, I guess. Life hasn't been too kind lately. She laughed humorlessly, gesturing to her soggy clothes and empty wallet. But hey, at least I've got pizza, or well, I had pizza. Daniel studied her profile, noting the resilience in her features despite the hardships she hinted at. You're an artist, he observed suddenly, pointing to the smudge of paint on her fingers. A painter? Her cheeks flushed slightly at being caught. Yeah, guilty as charged. How'd you know? The way you carry yourself, he explained. There's a certain intensity about you, like you see the world differently. Mia smiled faintly, touched by his observation. That's probably the nicest thing anyone said to me all week, she joked. What about you, Daniel? What's your story? He stiffened imperceptibly, his guard going up again. Not much to tell, he replied evasively. Just searching, I suppose. Searching for what? Mia pressed gently. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared off into the distance, watching the rain blur the city lights. Something real, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Something honest. Neither of them spoke after that, letting the moment stretch between them like a fragile thread. Eventually, Daniel stood up, brushing off his coat. Thank you again, Mia, he said sincerely, for the pizza and the conversation. Before she could respond, he pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. If you ever need anything, he continued, don't hesitate to reach out. Mia accepted the card with a puzzled frown, flipping it over to read the name embossed on the front. Daniel Hart. Beneath it was a title she didn't fully process, something about a tech company, but she tucked the card into her pocket without giving it much thought. As Daniel walked away into the rain, disappearing into the haze of the city, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter had been significant in ways she couldn't yet understand. The rain had stopped by the time Daniel Hart stepped into his sleek black car parked a few blocks away. He slid into the driver's seat, his expensive coat still damp and clinging to him, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere. On the woman with fiery red hair who had offered him her last slice of pizza. It wasn't just the act itself that lingered in his thoughts. It was her demeanor, her genuine kindness, and the way she seemed so unbothered by his outward appearance of wealth or misery. She hadn't judged him, hadn't asked for anything in return. In fact, she didn't even seem to care about the business card he'd given her before leaving. As he drove through the nearly empty streets of downtown Chicago, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on how different Mia was from the people he usually encountered. Most interactions in his life were transactional. People wanted something from him, whether it was money, connections, or influence. But Mia, she had approached him without an agenda, without pretense. And that simple gesture, a slice of pizza shared under a flickering street lamp, had left an indelible mark on him. Daniel's life was far from ordinary. At 38, he was already one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country, having built a tech empire from scratch. His name was synonymous with innovation, ambition, and wealth. Yet, none of those achievements brought him peace. Beneath the polished exterior lay a man burdened by loneliness. Despite being surrounded by people at galas, board meetings, and networking events, Daniel often felt like he was standing alone in a crowded room. The relationships in his life were shallow, fleeting, and ultimately unsatisfying. Friends came and went, chasing his fortune rather than his friendship. Even family gatherings felt strained, filled with expectations and unspoken criticisms. That night, however, something shifted. For the first time in years, Daniel experienced a moment of pure human connection, a reminder that not everyone saw him as the millionaire or the entrepreneur. To Mia, he was simply another person, someone worth stopping for on a rainy evening, Her lack of interest in his status struck a chord within him, awakening a longing he hadn't realized he'd suppressed for so long. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself replaying their conversation in his mind. He remembered the way she spoke about her struggles with such honesty, yet without bitterness. There was a quiet strength in her voice, a resilience that intrigued him. When she mentioned her passion for painting, her eyes lit up with a spark of excitement that made him wish he could see her work. Artists fascinated him because they created beauty out of chaos, finding meaning where others saw none. Perhaps that was why he couldn't stop thinking about her. Meanwhile, Mia returned to her small apartment, dripping wet and exhausted, but oddly content. She tossed her soaked jacket onto a chair and collapsed onto the couch, pulling out Daniel's business card from her pocket. Holding it between her fingers, she studied it curiously. The name Daniel Hart meant nothing to her initially, but when she searched online later that night, her jaw dropped. Images of him attending high-profile events, shaking hands with celebrities, and giving interviews flooded her screen. She learned about his company, Hart Tech Innovations, which had revolutionized several industries with its cutting-edge technology. He was worth billions, yet he had stood under a street lamp looking utterly lost. Mia shook her head in disbelief, placing the card on her cluttered coffee table. Well, that explains the fancy coat, she muttered to herself. But what surprised her more than his wealth was the vulnerability she had glimpsed beneath his polished facade. Wealthy people weren't supposed to look so fragile. Yet Daniel had seemed almost relieved when she sat beside him, as if her presence had momentarily lightened whatever weight he carried. Still, Mia dismissed the encounter as a random act of kindness, nothing more. Life moved quickly and she had other things to focus on. Her rent was overdue and her paintings were gathering dust in the corner of her studio. She spent the next week juggling odd jobs, waitressing during the day and sketching portraits for tourists in the evenings. Every penny counted and every day felt like a battle against uncertainty. One afternoon, while cleaning out her bag, Mia rediscovered Daniel's business card wedged between receipts and crumpled tissues. She stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to throw it away. On a whim and partly out of desperation, she decided to send him an email. She attached photos of some of her recent artwork along with a brief note thanking him for the conversation they'd shared that rainy night. It was a harmless gesture, she reasoned. At worst, he wouldn't respond. At best, maybe he'd offer some advice or encouragement. To her astonishment, Daniel replied within hours. His message was warm and enthusiastic, praising her talent and expressing admiration for her creativity. He mentioned that his foundation hosted an annual charity gala featuring emerging artists, and he would love for her to showcase her work there. The event attracted influential collectors, critics, and philanthropists, providing an unparalleled platform for exposure. Mia read the email twice, her heart racing with equal parts excitement and skepticism. Was this real? Could someone like Daniel Hart actually be interested in helping someone like her? Part of her worried it was too good to be true, but another part, the part that refused to give up on her dreams, decided to take the chance. After all, what did she have to lose? When the day of the gala arrived, Mia felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. She wore a simple black dress borrowed from a friend and carried a portfolio of her best pieces. As she entered the grand ballroom of the upscale hotel hosting the event, she was overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over elegantly dressed guests sipping champagne, and the walls were adorned with breathtaking artwork. For a moment, she wondered if she belonged here at all. But then she spotted Daniel across the room. He looked strikingly handsome in a tailored suit, his dark hair neatly styled. Unlike the other attendees, who laughed loudly and exchanged superficial pleasantries, Daniel stood quietly observing everything with a thoughtful expression. When he noticed Mia, his face broke into a genuine smile. He excused himself from the group he was talking to and walked over to greet her. "You made it," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm glad." "Me too," Mia replied, trying to steady her voice. "Thanks for inviting me. This is incredible." Daniel gestured toward the crowd. "Don't let them intimidate you. Your work speaks for itself. Trust me, people are going to love it." True to his word, Mia's paintings drew immediate attention. Attendees gathered around her display, marveling at the vibrant colors and intricate details. One collector in particular expressed keen interest in purchasing a piece titled "Fragments of Light," inspired by her reflections on hope amidst adversity. When the sale was finalized, Mia nearly cried, both from joy and disbelief. For the first time in years, she felt seen not just as a struggling artist, but as someone whose vision mattered. Throughout the evening, Daniel stayed close, introducing her to key figures in the art world and ensuring she felt comfortable. Their chemistry was undeniable, though neither acknowledged it openly. They talked animatedly about her inspirations, his experiences, and the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. By the end of the night, Mia realized she was beginning to trust Daniel, not just as a benefactor, but as a friend. For Daniel, the gala reinforced what he had suspected all along. Mia was special. Her authenticity, her passion, and her unwavering optimism reminded him of qualities he'd forgotten existed in people. Spending time with her rekindled a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He began to wonder if perhaps she was the answer to the emptiness he'd been searching for, not as a romantic interest, at least not yet, but as someone who challenged him to be better, to seek meaning beyond material success. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel walked Mia to her cab. Before she got in, he handed her another card, this one handwritten. "Call me anytime," he said softly. "Not just for opportunities like this, for anything." Mia smiled, clutching the card tightly. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." As the cab pulled away, Daniel watched her go, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't searching anymore. In the weeks following the charity gala, Mia's life began to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. The sale of her painting, Fragments of Light, had not only brought her a much-needed financial boost, but also opened doors she never thought possible. Galleries that had previously ignored her emails suddenly expressed interest in showcasing her work. Critics who once dismissed her as an amateur were now praising her unique style and emotional depth. For the first time in years, Mia allowed herself to dream bigger, not just about surviving, but about thriving. Daniel played a significant role in this transformation, though he never sought recognition for it. He continued to support Mia in subtle yet meaningful ways, introducing her to influential figures in the art world and encouraging her to apply for prestigious exhibitions. Yet, despite his generosity, Mia couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. She worried about what others might think, about whether people would assume she was using Daniel for his connections or wealth. More importantly, she feared losing the authenticity of their friendship if things became too transactional. One afternoon, as Mia sat in her tiny studio apartment surrounded by half-finished canvases and scattered paintbrushes, she found herself staring at Daniel's handwritten card. His words echoed in her mind. "Call me any time. Not just for opportunities like this, for anything." She hesitated, biting her lip as doubt crept in. Was it wrong to lean on him? Did accepting his help make her beholden to him in some way? Her internal debate was interrupted by a knock at the door. Startled, she stood up and opened it to find Daniel standing there, holding a paper bag from her favorite local cafe. "I come bearing coffee," he announced with a grin, stepping inside before she could protest. "And possibly a pastry or two." Mia laughed, momentarily forgetting her worries. "You didn't have to do that," she said, gesturing for him to sit on the couch while she cleared off a spot amidst the clutter. "But thank you. You're officially my favorite person today." Daniel chuckled, setting the bag down on the coffee table. "Good to know I rank above hunger and chaos." He glanced around the room, taking in the vibrant colors splashed across, canvases leaning against every available surface. "This place suits you," he remarked. "It's messy, chaotic, and full of life, just like your art." Mia blushed slightly, unused to such direct compliments. Thanks, I think, she teased, handing him a cup of coffee. Though messy might be an understatement, they spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing, the challenges of running a business, the quirks of modern art critics, and even their shared love of old movies. As the conversation flowed effortlessly, Mia realized how comfortable she felt around Daniel. There was no pressure to impress him, no need to pretend she had it all figured out. With him, she could simply be herself. Eventually, the topic turned to her career. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. Mia, I want to talk to you about something, he began. I've been thinking. What do you say we turn one of your dreams into reality? She frowned, tilting her head in confusion. What do you mean? He hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. You've mentioned wanting to open your own gallery, a space where artists like you can showcase their work without worrying about commercial pressures. Well, I'd like to help you make that happen. Mia's eyes widened in shock. Wait, what? Are you serious? Completely, he replied. Think about it. A gallery run by someone who understands the struggles of emerging artists. A place that prioritizes creativity over profit. It could be incredible. The idea took her breath away. Opening her own gallery had always been a distant dream, something she assumed would remain out of reach for years. But now, here was Daniel offering to make it a reality. Still, her instincts screamed caution. That's amazing, she stammered. But are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated or... I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it. Daniel interrupted gently. This isn't charity, Mia. It's an investment in you and your vision and in the future of art. Besides, he added with a wry smile, you already gave me pizza. Consider this returning the favor. Despite his light-hearted tone, Mia could see the sincerity in his eyes. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Over the next several months, Mia threw herself into planning the gallery. Daniel provided the funding and resources, but he insisted she take the lead creatively. Together, they scoured the city for the perfect location, a cozy brick building tucked away in an artsy neighborhood. They worked tirelessly to renovate the space, transforming it into a warm, inviting environment that reflected Mia's personality. Every detail, from the lighting to the layout, was designed to celebrate the artists who would display their work there. As opening day approached, Mia alternated between excitement and anxiety. What if no one showed up? What if critics tore the gallery apart? Daniel noticed her growing apprehension and pulled her aside one evening. Hey, he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You've got this. Trust yourself. His confidence in her was contagious, and by the time the grand opening arrived, Mia felt ready to face whatever came her way. The night of the event, the gallery buzzed with energy. Artists mingled with collectors. Friends laughed over glasses of wine, and strangers marveled at the eclectic mix of paintings, sculptures, and installations. At the center of it all stood Mia, glowing with pride as she watched her dream come to life. Throughout the evening, Daniel stayed close, quietly observing the joy radiating from Mia's face. He felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. Helping Mia achieve her goals wasn't just about giving back. It was about rediscovering parts of himself he had long buried beneath layers of ambition and isolation. In her, he saw hope, resilience, and a reminder of why he had pursued success in the first place, to create opportunities for others. But as the night wore on, Daniel couldn't ignore the growing tension within him. Their bond had deepened significantly, over the past few months evolving into something far more intimate than either of them had anticipated. He cared for Mia deeply, not just as a friend or protege, but as someone who made him want to be better, to live differently. Yet he knew their worlds were vastly different. How could someone like him, burdened by wealth and expectations, truly fit into her life without overshadowing it? For her part, Mia wrestled with similar doubts. She admired Daniel immensely, not just for his generosity, but for the vulnerability he allowed her to see. Beneath his polished exterior lay a man searching for meaning, connection, and redemption. She found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't fully explain, yet fear held her back. Could their relationship survive the inevitable scrutiny that came with his status? Would she always be seen as the girl who gave him pizza rather than an equal partner? Despite these uncertainties, neither of them could deny the pull between them. It simmered beneath the surface, unspoken but undeniable, during quiet moments when their eyes met across a crowded room, or when their hands brushed accidentally while working side by side. Both knew they were nearing a crossroads, but neither was ready to confront it just yet. As the gallery settled into its rhythm in the weeks that followed, Mia and Daniel continued to navigate their evolving dynamic. They supported each other through challenges, celebrated victories big and small, and grew closer with each passing day. Yet the question lingered in the air, unasked but ever present. Where did they go from here? As the weeks turned into months, Mia and Daniel's friendship deepened in ways neither of them had anticipated. They spent more time together, not just discussing art or business, but sharing pieces of themselves they rarely revealed to others. Late-night conversations became a regular part of their routine, often taking place on Mia's couch or during quiet walks through the city streets. These moments were filled with laughter, vulnerability, and an unspoken understanding that grew stronger with each passing day. For Daniel, these interactions offered a glimpse into a world he had long forgotten, a world where success wasn't measured by bank balances or boardroom victories, but by the connections we forge and the lives we touch. Mia reminded him of simpler times before his family's expectations and society's pressures had shaped him into someone he barely recognized. She saw him not as the millionaire or the entrepreneur, but as a person capable of kindness, humor, and even self-doubt. Her unwavering belief in him awakened emotions he thought he'd lost forever: hope, joy, and a desire for something more meaningful than wealth or power. Mia, too, found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. Growing up, she had learned to rely only on herself, guarding her heart against disappointment and rejection. But Daniel's consistent presence in her life began to chip away at those walls. He listened without judgment, encouraged her dreams, and celebrated her successes as if they were his own. Slowly, she started to trust him, not just as a benefactor or friend, but as someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the gallery, Mia invited Daniel over for dinner. She wasn't much of a cook, so she ordered takeout from a nearby Italian restaurant, setting up a makeshift picnic on her living room floor. The atmosphere was cozy, with soft music playing in the background and candles flickering on the coffee table. As they ate, the conversation drifted toward more personal topics. "So?" Mia began hesitantly, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "You've seen my messy apartment, heard about my struggles, but I still don't know much about you. Like, who is Daniel Hart when he's not wearing a suit or shaking hands with investors?" Daniel paused, caught off guard by the question. He set his plate aside and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling as if searching for the right words. "I'm not sure how to answer that," he admitted finally. "Most people see me as this larger-than-life figure, but the truth is, I feel like I've been playing a role my entire life." "What do you mean?" Mia asked gently, sensing the weight behind his words. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My family comes from old money. From the moment I could walk, I was groomed to take over the family business, to uphold traditions, maintain appearances, and never show weakness. But none of that ever felt right to me. I wanted to create, to innovate, to build something of my own. So I left home, started Heart Tech, and worked tirelessly to prove myself. And yeah, I succeeded. But at what cost?" Mia nodded, encouraging him to continue. She could hear the pain in his voice, the years of pent-up frustration and loneliness spilling out in waves. "I built an empire," Daniel continued, his tone heavy with regret. "But along the way, I lost sight of why I started. Friendships became transactions. Relationships turned superficial. Even my family. They only care about my achievements, not who I am as a person. For years, I convinced myself it didn't matter, that as long as I kept succeeding, everything else would fall into place, but he trailed off, looking directly at Mia. Then I met you. Her breath hitched slightly, her heart skipping a beat. She didn't dare interrupt, afraid of breaking the fragile honesty of the moment. You reminded me that there's more to life than titles and bank accounts, Daniel said softly. That kindness matters. That being real, vulnerable, it's not a weakness. It's a strength. You've given me something I didn't realize I needed, perspective. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. I didn't do anything special, she protested, her voice trembling. You're the one who's changed. You let yourself be open, honest. That takes courage. They sat in silence for a while, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Neither dared to acknowledge the growing connection they both felt, fearing it might ruin the delicate balance of their friendship. Yet the tension lingered, undeniable and intoxicating. Over the next few weeks, Daniel made a conscious effort to share more of himself with Mia. He introduced her to his favorite books, took her to hidden gems in the city only locals knew about, and even brought her to meet his younger sister Emily, a sharp-witted photographer who instantly bonded with Mia over their shared love of creativity. Through these experiences, Mia saw glimpses of the man Daniel might have been if life hadn't pushed him down such a rigid path. He laughed more freely, smiled more often, and seemed lighter, as if shedding layers of armor he no longer needed. But alongside this newfound closeness came challenges. As word spread about Daniel's involvement with Mia's gallery, whispers began to circulate in social circles. Some accused her of using him for his wealth, while others questioned his motives, suggesting he was merely indulging in a fleeting romance. Though neither paid much attention to the gossip, it weighed on them nonetheless. They knew their relationship defied convention, and navigating the gap between their worlds required constant communication and compromise. One chilly autumn afternoon, as they strolled through Central Park, surrounded by golden leaves and crisp air, Mia finally voiced the question that had been lingering in her mind for weeks. Do you ever think about us? She asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the ground. Not just as friends, but as something more? Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise and hesitation. All the time, he admitted after a pause. But I didn't want to say anything because, well, I didn't want to scare you off. Mia chuckled nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Too late for that, she joked, attempting to lighten the mood. When he didn't laugh, she sobered, meeting his gaze. I care about you, Daniel. A lot. But I can't help wondering if we're setting ourselves up for heartbreak. Your world. It's so different from mine. What happens when reality catches up with us? He reached out, gently cupping her cheek in his hand. We'll figure it out together, he promised, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in his chest. I won't pretend it'll be easy, but I also can't imagine walking away from what we have, not anymore. Their first kiss happened moments later, tentative yet electric, sealing a bond that had been building for months. It wasn't perfect. Life rarely was, but it felt real, raw, and undeniably right. In the days that followed, they navigated their new dynamic with care, aware of the challenges ahead. Friends and acquaintances raised eyebrows, offering unsolicited advice or warnings about the pitfalls of mixing love and ambition. But Mia and Daniel refused to let external opinions dictate their happiness. They leaned on each other, finding solace in the fact that they understood one another in ways no one else could. Through late-night talks, shared meals, and quiet moments of reflection, they discovered that their differences weren't obstacles, they were opportunities. Daniel taught Mia the value of perseverance and strategic thinking, while she reminded him to embrace spontaneity and live in the moment. Together, they created a partnership rooted in mutual respect, trust, and a shared vision for the future. And, though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. They were ready to face it, together. The weeks following their first kiss marked the beginning of a new chapter for Mia and Daniel. Their relationship, once defined by friendship and mutual admiration, now carried the weight of romance, and with it came challenges neither had fully anticipated. While their bond grew stronger with each passing day, blending their vastly different worlds proved to be more complicated than either had imagined. Daniel's life was one of constant motion. Meetings, phone calls, and high-profile events filled his schedule, leaving little room for spontaneity. For Mia, whose days revolved around painting, gallery visits, and quiet moments of reflection, this pace felt overwhelming at times. She admired Daniel's dedication, but worried that the demands of his career might overshadow their connection. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to reconcile his desire to support Mia's dreams with the expectations placed on him as a prominent figure in the business world. He knew that introducing her into his orbit meant exposing her to scrutiny she hadn't asked for, and he hated the thought of putting her in an uncomfortable position. Despite these concerns, they tackled the obstacles head-on, determined not to let external pressures dictate their happiness. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Daniel arrived at Mia's apartment carrying a bottle of wine and a sheepish grin. "I figured we could use a night off from everything," he said, holding up the bottle. "No talk of galleries, no board meetings, no gossip columns, just us." Mia smiled, welcoming him inside. "Sounds perfect," she replied, setting 2 glasses on the table. As they settled onto the couch, sipping wine and sharing stories about their day, the tension between them melted away. These small, intimate moments became their sanctuary, a reminder that beneath the titles and responsibilities, they were simply 2 people who cared deeply for each other. Over time, they developed strategies to navigate their differences. Daniel began carving out pockets of time in his busy schedule specifically for Mia, whether it was joining her for morning coffee or surprising her with tickets to an art exhibit. In return, Mia learned to embrace the occasional chaos of Daniel's world, attending charity galas and networking events by his side. Though stepping into those glittering ballrooms made her feel out of place at first, she found comfort in knowing she was there not because of obligation, but because she wanted to support him. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. Friends and acquaintances continued to speculate about the nature of their relationship, some offering praise while others voiced skepticism. Emily, Daniel's younger sister, became a staunch advocate for the couple. "You two are good for each other," she told them during one of their dinners together. "Anyone can see how much happier you both are. Don't let anyone else's opinions get in the way of that." But even with encouragement from loved ones, doubts occasionally crept in. One rainy afternoon, as Mia prepared for an exhibition, at the gallery, Daniel called to cancel their dinner plans due to an unexpected crisis at work. Frustration bubbled up inside her, though she tried to push it aside. By the time he finally arrived hours later, soaked and exhausted, she couldn't hide her feelings any longer. "This isn't just about tonight," she said, pacing the living room as he stood dripping in the doorway. "It's about feeling like I'm always second to your job, like no matter what happens, your responsibilities will always come first." Daniel flinched, guilt washing over his face. "Mia, I'm sorry," he began, stepping closer. "You're not second to anything, not to my work, not to anyone, but I won't lie. Balancing everything is hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing you." Her expression softened, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know you're trying," she admitted, "and I appreciate it. But I need to know that this us is worth fighting for. Because if it's not, maybe we should stop before things get worse." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Daniel reached out, taking her hands in his. "It is worth fighting for," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing outside. "You're worth fighting for. And I promise, I'll do better. We'll do better. Together." That conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. From that moment on, they committed to prioritizing open communication and compromise. Daniel started delegating tasks at work more effectively, ensuring he had time to focus on Mia without neglecting his responsibilities. Mia, in turn, worked on being patient and understanding, recognizing that Daniel's dedication to his career was part of who he was, and something she admired deeply. As winter approached, their bond only grew stronger. They celebrated milestones, big and small, the success of Mia's latest exhibition, Daniel's promotion within his company, and even quiet victories like completing a challenging puzzle together on a lazy Sunday afternoon. Each triumph brought them closer, reinforcing their belief that love wasn't about perfection. It was about partnership. One snowy evening, Daniel took Mia to a secluded rooftop garden overlooking the city skyline. The air was crisp and tiny fairy lights twinkled above them, casting a warm glow across the space. As they walked hand in hand along the frost-covered path, Daniel stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "Mia," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something I've been wanting to say for a long time." He paused, pulling a small box from his coat pocket. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the words, "Together always." "I know we've faced our share of challenges," he continued, his gaze locking onto hers. "But every step of the way, you've shown me what it means to truly live, to find joy in the little things, to embrace vulnerability and to build something beautiful out of uncertainty. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible, and I can't imagine going forward without you by my side." Tears streamed down Mia's face as she listened, her heart swelling with emotion. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of the city below. "You've done the same for me. You've taught me to believe in myself, to dream bigger, and to trust that love can survive even the toughest storms." He slid the bracelet onto her wrist, his fingers brushing against her skin. "So here's my promise to you," he said, his tone resolute. "No matter what happens, whether it's success or failure, laughter or tears, we'll face it together. Always." They kissed under the starlit sky, the cold wind wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the city and the warmth of their love, all their fears and doubts seemed to fade away. They weren't just Daniel and Mia anymore. They were a team, united by a shared commitment to building a future, rooted in honesty, respect, and unwavering support. Life didn't become easier overnight. Challenges still arose, from professional setbacks to personal insecurities. But through it all, they held on to the promise they had made that night, to stand by each other no matter what. Their love wasn't perfect. It was messy, imperfect, and real, but it was theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered. A year had passed since that snowy evening on the rooftop garden, and Mia's art gallery was thriving. The space she and Daniel had worked so hard to create had become a haven for emerging artists, a place where creativity flourished without the pressure of commercial expectations. Paintings, sculptures, and installations adorned the walls and floors, each piece telling a unique story. Visitors often lingered for hours, captivated not just by the artwork, but by the warmth and authenticity of the environment. On this particular morning, Mia stood in the center of the gallery, taking it all in. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting golden hues across the room. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her fiery red hair tied back into a loose bun. Her hands were covered in paint smudges, remnants of an early morning session spent finishing a new painting. It was a portrait of two figures standing under a starlit sky, a tribute to her journey with Daniel. The gallery buzzed with excitement as staff prepared for the grand reopening event later that evening. After months of renovations and expansions, the space was bigger and better than ever. Tonight would mark its official debut, with critics, collectors, and friends gathering to celebrate. For Mia, it was more than just another milestone. It was proof that dreams, no matter how daunting, could come true with determination and support. As she adjusted a painting on the wall, the door creaked open. Daniel stepped inside, his presence immediately filling the room. He looked sharp in a tailored navy suit, though his tie was slightly loosened, giving him a relaxed air. His eyes scanned the gallery before landing on Mia, lighting up with pride. "You've outdone yourself," he said, walking over to her. "This place is incredible." Mia smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "We did it together," she corrected gently. "None of this would have been possible without you." Daniel shook his head, dismissing the praise. "I just provided the tools. You're the one who built the masterpiece." He gestured toward the portrait she had been working on earlier. "Is that us?" She nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Yeah. I wanted to capture everything we've been through, the struggles, the triumphs, the moments that made us who we are now." He studied the painting intently, his expression softening. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "Just like you." They shared a quiet moment, their connection palpable even amidst the organized chaos around them. Over the past year, their relationship had continued to evolve, growing deeper and stronger with every challenge they faced. They had learned to navigate the complexities of blending their worlds, finding balance between Daniel's high-powered career and Mia's artistic passions. Friends and skeptics alike had watched their journey unfold, many admitting they hadn't expected the couple to last, but here they were, proving everyone wrong. That evening, the gallery was packed. Guests mingled beneath twinkling string lights, sipping champagne and marveling at the vibrant displays. Artists whose work lined the walls beamed with pride as admirers praised their talent. In the corner, a live band played soft jazz, adding to the celebratory atmosphere. Mia moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and introducing herself to newcomers. She felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she'd experienced before, not because of the accolades or attention, but because she had created something meaningful, something real. At one point, she found herself standing beside Daniel near the entrance. He leaned down, whispering in her ear, "Are you ready for your speech? Everyone's waiting to hear from you." She glanced toward the small stage set, up at the far end of the room where a microphone awaited. Nervous butterflies fluttered in her stomach, but she nodded confidently. "Let's do it." Hand in hand, they made their way to the stage. As Mia stepped forward, the chatter died down and all eyes turned to her. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she started, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "This gallery has always been about more than just art. It's about community, collaboration, and believing in the power of creativity to change lives, including my own." Her gaze shifted to Daniel, who stood off to the side, watching her, with unwavering support. "When I first dreamed of opening this space, I never imagined it would grow into what it is today, and honestly, I don't think I could have done it alone. There's someone who believed in me when I doubted myself, who encouraged me to dream bigger and fight harder. Without him, none of this would exist." The crowd erupted into applause, turning to look at Daniel, who raised his hands in mock protest. "Don't give me too much credit," he joked, eliciting laughter from the audience. Mia grinned, then continued, "But beyond the gallery, he's given me something even more valuable, a reminder that kindness matters, that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even under a flickering street lamp on a rainy night." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. She held up her wrist, showing the engraved bracelet Daniel had given her months ago. "So tonight I want to say thank you to everyone here, and especially to Daniel. You saved me, long before I realized I needed saving." Tears glistened in her eyes as she stepped back, signaling the end of her speech. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the gallery like a symphony. Daniel stepped onto the stage, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You saved me too," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "more than you'll ever know." Later that night, as the festivities wound down and the last guests departed, Mia and Daniel stood together outside the gallery. The city lights twinkled in the distance, reflecting off puddles left behind by an earlier rain shower. They wrapped, their arms around each other, savoring the quiet after the storm. "I can't believe how far we've come," Mia said softly, resting her head against Daniel's shoulder. From that first slice of pizza to this, Daniel chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Who would have thought a piece of pizza could lead to all this? It wasn't the pizza, she replied, tilting her head to look at him. It was the person behind it. Someone willing to stop and listen, to see me when no one else did. And you saw me too, he added, his voice filled with gratitude. You reminded me what it means to be human, to feel, to hope, to dream. Together, we've created something extraordinary. As they walked home under the starlit sky hand in hand, Mia couldn't help but smile. Their story wasn't perfect, it was messy, unpredictable, and full of challenges. But it was theirs, a testament to the power of compassion, resilience, and love. And as they disappeared into the glow of the city, their hearts intertwined. One thing was certain. Sometimes the smallest gestures can spark the greatest transformations.